Welcome to Martini Time. So, let's let our magic frog jump into the pool of the unconscious and see what treasure he comes up with. So, I was thinking today about what I'm always wondering what I'm doing. I mean, just what do I do? And I've always said I see metaphors, but on Facebook and when I write, but what's a metaphor, and what do I mean by that, and what good is it? So, if you've been following my talks, like yesterday, we created a metaphor of the karma cart. And the karma cart is the like a roller coaster cart that comes up and you're standing on the platform, and it's going to have a roller coaster ride of karma. In other words, you're going to have a Groundhog Day, and you're going to get in that cart and you're going to have the same fight with somebody, or you're going to have the same Groundhog Day recycled pattern again, and you go all the way around, and then you come back and it dumps you out on the platform, and you say, it happened again. I'll never do it again. Why does this happen to me? And you make vows and everything, and pretty soon you forget about it. The next thing, the karma cart comes around and you get in it. That's a metaphor. And then this morning we talked about the labeling machine. The mind is a labeling machine. And it labels life with names and forms and meaning, but it also labels life, like a labeling machine where you stamp everything. What's that? I don't know. Let me stamp it. Aha, it's a box. But we don't know it until we stample it. Put a name on it, you see. But the labeling machine is like with this hand, and it's unconscious. And this hand is saying, what is that? And oh, look at that and all that. But the labeling machine is unconscious, so it labels something before you see it. And then when you see it, you just see your label. But it also labels or stamps the grammatical structure of our language. So you think everything is a noun that does things to other nouns. Like grammar, when in English, nouns, verbs, objects. And we think the world works like that. We think everything's a noun doing something to another noun. But the labeling machine puts the structure of the label, because the label by itself doesn't have any meaning. It has to have some grammar to it. Okay, so the labeling machine gives it its language structure, which is our Indo-European language. If you had another language, some languages just have verbs, no nouns. Everything's a verb. What would the world look like there? So these are metaphors. And I was thinking this afternoon, well, maybe what I'm doing is creating a metaphor toolbox. So if you have the intention to work on your mind as an operating system. Now, I don't mean like to fixing your mind. You can't fix your mind because the mind can't fix the mind. It's like a computer. The operating system can't fix the operating system. You have to have a disk utility that will operate on your operating system from the outside. So how can you operate on your mind? You see, you can't operate on it from the inside. And the ego can't operate on the ego. So what to do, you see? Well, we need a metaphor toolbox. Now, a metaphor toolbox is different from a mechanic's toolbox or a cook's toolbox or a surgeon's toolbox or I was just watching A Midsummer Mystery, and they had a mortician there, and he had a toolbox, and all of these mysteries have a pathologist or what do you call? I guess the pathologist, but they have a toolbox. And they're always operating on the corpse. You know, this is very popular now. When did that start? With CSI started, where you have the detective stories, the mysteries, all have a pathologist who's going to do an autopsy. And you get in there and you see the exposed corpse and all of this, and something really gets really gory, you know. And but anyway, they got a toolbox and they're operating on a corpse. Well, I just was thinking, you know, well, if you're going to operate on your operating system, that is the you know what an operating system is. Operating system on a computer is a good metaphor, because it does stuff, but it only does what it's programmed to do. And if you have a Mac operating system or a Windows operating system, there may be another one, but whatever you do is shaped by that operating system. And if you don't understand the operating system, you can't fix it. You know, so the mind, every mind has an operating system, and this operating system has laws to it, has a code. And those people that want to operate on the computer operating system learn the code. So you can see who wrote it, and you can rewrite it. There was a movie, Inception, which I really liked, and that was a little team that would go into the dream of another person and go down through the layers of the dream and plant an idea down there, so when the person woke up, they would suddenly want to do that. So like they changed the program. Well, that's, you know, now operating on the mind's operating system is not like that. You don't want to change the program. A lot of self-help programs, hypnosis, a lot of different self-help programs have the idea of changing the mind. You know, think positive. Just put positive thoughts in there. Or say a mantra. Repeat the mantra all, you know. Or there are different techniques, and they all have their value, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about Zen Buddhism. We're talking about Buddhism in the sense that we're talking about a tradition that wants to see the operating system. I don't have my cotton ball here, but the way to operate on the mind's operating system is not to fix it, but to catch it in the act, to see it in the act. It's kind of like the cookie jar metaphor. The mind, the ego is a cookie jar thief. There you go. The ego is a cookie. Now, a metaphor is basically a street with two signs. One pointing one way, one pointing the other way. One way going that way, one way going that way. All right. So, here we can make a metaphor out of this. So, this is a battery, and it has a positive end, has a negative end, okay? So, if we made this into a metaphor, I would say a double bind is a battery. A double something. Well, let me see. That's good. I don't know. Your dilemma, your neurosis, is a battery. Now, a metaphor does not mean it's like a battery. It says is a battery. I don't know if this is a good one or not, but anyway, we'll work with it. So the metaphor, say your dilemma, or your double bind, or your neurosis, or whatever I want to call it, your problem is a battery. Okay, so metaphor, the battery points to the battery, a fact, and then it points to the unseen, which is you, your mind. So now how is the battery going to help, the battery as a metaphor, going to help you catch your mind in a cookie jar? So, all right, so every time you just try to do the positive and you don't do the negative, you don't see the negative in what you're doing, you just see the positive and you repress the negative, you reject the negative. That's like in a battery trying to get rid of the negative pole and still have electricity. So this is positive, this is negative. If you cut this off and get the negative off, this end is still going to be negative. So you can never get rid of the negative. You keep on cutting and cutting and cutting it away. It's still there, you see. The other end of the polarity of the battery is always there. You can't get rid of it. But that negative thing that you're cutting off is still there, but you can't see it. So it comes at you as your enemy. The negative that you cut off comes at you as your opposite, as your opposition that you have to get rid of. So you keep trying to get rid of your attacker, your aggressor. And it's your own negativity that you're cutting off, you see. So the metaphor would work then is the next time you get in an opinion war on Facebook, that's you label it as a negative because it's, again, I'm positive and that guy's negative. In other words, I label him negative because he is not agreeing with my positive. That's negative. So I want to get rid of it. So I try to argue him out of it. Or I call him an idiot. Or I defriend him. That's trying to cut off the other polarity. You see. So if he never appears again, you excommunicated him, that same pattern is going to reappear in the next guy that has an opinion that you don't like. You see, it's the same metaphor, it's the same battery. You just keep trying to chop off the negative so you can be positive and have no negative. I'm the one, you see. So that, there again, that picks up the labeling machine, and that's your karma card. Okay, but anyway, you see what you get the idea what the metaphor, the value of the metaphor is that if you have the intention to catch your operating system with its hand in the cookie jar, that is being responsible for your suffering, if you have that intention, if you don't have the intention, you won't see it, so forget about it. But if you have that intention to see, which kind of like the seeing is operation, in the sense that seeing is active. You know, we think seeing is passive. I'm just seeing. No. The seeing we're talking about, the seeing of Buddhism and Zen and the transcendent way, the seeing that is transformative, the seeing that changes your life, is active seeing, not passive receptive seeing, just sitting back and looking around. No. Seeing is action. So, well, it's a good example here. If you've got your hand on a hot plate, you come in and, you know, one of the, my mother has one of these, or had one, she's dead. But, you know, these stoves that have a top with the burners embedded in, I can't think what the name, but you can't see them. Suppose you come in, you know, and the thing's on, and you stand there and you put your hand on it. Whoa, something's burning. Whoa! You see? When you see that you have your hand on the hot plate, you don't say, oh, I think I ought to take it off. The seeing and the action of taking it off is the same thing. And we experience this all the time when we're threatened by death or having a close encounter. Seeing suddenly becomes action. But if we're not having a close encounter, we're just thinking about it. If seeing becomes kind of passive. That's seeing through the ego, through the mind. But when we have a close encounter, like driving and suddenly somebody's coming out. I remember I was coming home one day on a one-lane, two-lane road here, and it was dark and some cars were coming. Yeah, we're just driving along. And suddenly the car that was coming, there was a little bit of a curve, and suddenly he just kept going right straight at me, and I swear it wasn't much. It looked like it was 20 feet, and there were headlights right in front of the window. There was no time to think and say, oh my gosh, somebody's in, what am I going to do? Suddenly I was driving around, I swerved around, and the right side of the car was in the gravel, and I can remember hearing the gravel, and the left side, this car went by, totally in my lane. I was out of the lane on the right, in the dark, and this car went by, shoo, like that, like a bull. Didn't even hit the window. That close. And then I got back on the road, and then I started thinking again. What the hell was that? It was boom, it was like that, you know. Who was driving? Seeing and action was one. I wasn't thinking about what to do. There was no training. I'm not trained to do anything, you see. But being and seeing are one when we have a close encounter. And we all have little experiences like that. Wow, how did you get out of that? Somebody rescues somebody out of a fire. And they come out after it, you know, oh my God, how'd you do it? I don't know how I did it. That's why people who do heroic actions are always embarrassed to get a medal because they don't feel like they did it. Not the person who's getting the medal. He didn't do it. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but now I forget where I was. Seeing is action. So when you have the intention to turn and begin to, like a detective, find out who did it, who's causing my suffering, who's responsible for my suffering. We get tired of blaming everybody. That doesn't work. Blame the world, blame somebody else. Cause and effect. The effect is suffering. Who's the cause? What's the cause? Well, Buddha says the cause is you. But, you see, that's just an intellectual conclusion. That doesn't do a darn thing. Intellectually conceptualizing the fact that you're the cause of your suffering. You have to see it. You have to see your hand in the cookie jar. Like when the kid who says, who took the cookies? I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, you see. And so one night the mother goes in and flicks on the kitchen light, and there's the kid with the hand in the cookie jar. All right? So the hand in the cookie jar is the hand with the labeling machine. And it's the the metaphor toolbox is basically some metaphors that you resonate with, like the labeling machine. So if you're really interested in seeing into the cause of my suffering, you have to see the unconscious operating system of the mind doing something that creates your suffering. You see, the mind is half conscious and half unconscious. And the unconscious half is doing the mischief that the conscious half is trying to get out of. You talk about Trump shooting himself in the foot, shooting himself in his policies, constantly negating what he's trying to do with the positive. You see, Trump has, getting back to this, Trump has said, I'm going to be a winner, I'm going to be a positive, everybody's going to be positive, everybody's going to be a winner, we're just going to cut off losers. No losers, we're going to cut off the negative, chop, chop, chop. Well, now you got positive, and now you still got the negative, but he thinks it's, where is the negative coming from? I got rid of it. Well, the negative is still there, but it's coming, but he's unconscious. So his unconscious is undoing what his consciousness does during the day. This is like in the Life of Pi on the carnivorous island. These movies are all metaphors. They all give us clues. The Life of Pi and the carnivorous island. So when he leaves the island, he says with his wisdom reflection, he says, what the island gave during the day, it took away at night. This is Trump. What he gives during the day, he takes away at night, but he thinks somebody else did it. You see. So that's the metaphor of the battery. You can't cut away the negative because the battery won't work without a pole. Life won't work unless it's a polarity. And you have to accept both polarities. And if you can accept both polarities of your life, you're going to get a lot of energy. Because plug that battery into something that'll light up the world. You see? So there's where your energy is. But you have to see that. You have to see yourself cutting away the negative in the dark. And if you see it, that seeing is the positive and negative pole of the battery. That turns on the light. The light of seeing is turned on when you accept the negative and the positive as one. It's the negative and positive. See, here's where the metaphor comes in. The negative and the positive are one, but it's two. It's two ends. We perceive one or the other. We can't see them both at the same time, but the battery is one. So that points in two directions. It points to one, it points to two that are contradictory. See that? Two that's contradictory, boom, boom. So we see one or the other, got to get the bad, keep the good, get rid of the bad. And the other end points to the one. That's the whole battery. Seeing that is action comes from the whole battery. Seeing that is action unites the pairs of opposites, the contradictions in our life, the inconsistencies in our lower nature, with one hand doing one hand and the other hand doing the other. But you have to want to see it. You have to want to wake up. You have to want to look. You have to want it. And if you want it, you'll get it. That's for sure. Thanks for dropping in.